7:25 says that the prince who will come will wear out the saints of the Most High. Verse 25, 7:25, that's coming out. That's the beast man. He's working against the saints of God at that point. Oh, where is it? It's in the 62 weeks because he's saying 70 weeks have been. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Right there in front of me all the time. Good gracious. Okay, so it's in 9:24. 70 weeks are determined upon your people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make a reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. 70 weeks, right? 70 weeks determined upon the city and the people to finish transgression, in other words, the transgression of Israel, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness. Jesus did all that by his death and resurrection. That part right there is where Jesus left off. He brought everlasting righteousness. We are in the time now to seal up the vision and the prophecy, so it's being sealed up for a period of time. And then at the end of all of it, it will be to anoint the most holy. At the end of the final 7-year period, Jesus is finally anointed as the most holy king, brought before the Father, rules the world for 1,000 years, is the final king. Destroys the beast, calls it in, calls an end to everything, and finally has dominion over the entire world, and the church rules with him. So when this says at the end of verse 9, and it says that in the midst of the week, he'll cause the sacrifice, the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abomination, he'll make it desolate, even to the consummation, and that term will be poured out upon the desolate. That's where he's at. It's like, at the point, this is going to go all the way until Jesus comes back. When Jesus comes back, that's when this prophecy is going to end. So that's where we leave off on 9. That's the end of chapter 9. We are officially at the end of the beast kingdom at that point. So when we jump into verse 10, or chapter 10, I'm not going to go through all of chapter 10. As a matter of fact, I'm skipping quite a bit of it. The gist of chapter 10 is Daniel ends up having an understanding. He begins fasting and praying. An angel comes to talk with him about it and to tell him what's going on and what the meaning of these prophecies are. And it's the angel Gabriel, which we talked about. We talked a little bit about angelology. We talked about how Gabriel is a messenger angel. So he had how many wings? You remember? Messenger angels have 6 wings, that's right. And warring angels have 4 wings. Okay, so we're going to jump into chapter 11. We're not reading the entirety of chapter 11. To be honest with you, there's a lot about chapter 11 that I've never studied, and I probably won't. I'm just being honest. Yeah, it is a lot of history. And at some point, when I dig history enough to really dig into it and research it, I will. But I am not a history person. I like history and I like learning history, but there's so much history, it's just overwhelming to me. But there are pieces about Daniel 11. Daniel 11, by the way, is the longest, I think, it's the longest prophecy we have in Scripture. So it starts, he hits the ball rolling, and it just goes, right? But there are pieces about Daniel 11 that I know that will sound familiar, so let's just read a few of these. Now I'll show you the things, verse 2, Behold, there will stand up 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th will be richer than them all. In his strength and his riches he'll stir up against the realm of Greece. Now remember we talked about Greece earlier in Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 8. We talked about the king of Greece, which the king of Greece was Alexander the Great, remember? No, he ruled the entire known world. He was the horn that was broken off. Remember there was a ram that was like doing the jig, and the goat comes out of nowhere, like Sonic the Hedgehog, doesn't touch the ground, ends up taking his horn, smashing the ram, stamping the residue with his feet, and then it says that the horn was broken off of the goat, and in its place came up 4 horns. We talked about the 4 horns being Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus, and how as Alexander the Great was on his deathbed, he did not leave his kingdom to his son, but he said, leave my kingdom to the strong. And so that opened up war games in the entire nation of Greece. All of the men who thought that they could win came on a battlefield, And these 4 guys could not kill each other. Everybody else was dead, but these 4 guys could not kill one another. And so Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus ended up taking the Grecian kingdom. They divided it between themselves. They each took a part of it. And so that's where we get the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Seleucid dynasty, and so on and so forth. So when you look at this right here in verse 3, we're talking about Greece, because he says right here in the end of it, it says he'll stir up the realm of Greece. Verse 3, a mighty king will stand up. He'll rule with great dominion. He'll do according to his will. When he stands up, his kingdom shall be broken, and it will be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom will be plucked up, even for others beside those. So he's saying here, this is just agreeing with what history says, which is that when Alexander the Great died, he didn't leave it to his posterity. He did not give it to his son. He left it to the strong. And the 4 horns that we read about in Daniel chapter 8 are the 4 winds of heaven right here in this scripture that we're seeing here. So that it was given to the 4 winds. And that's where we're going to stop, because there's a whole bunch of history that happens between that, and it's just talking about king after king after king after king after king that keeps coming. Lots of kings' wives, lots of stuff that I don't know anything about. And I'm just being honest, I'm not interested in trying to figure it out. Someday maybe I will, but right now I'm not. But if we keep going, by the time we get to verse 21, we've got this row of kings, king after king after king after king after king. So after Alexander the Great, we have Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus, and then we have these kings. And Daniel 11 is the one prophecy that actually fills in those kings, if you're interested in figuring out. I'm not aware of any other scripture that talks about the kings in between Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus, and the beast, other than Daniel 11. So this in verse 21, verse 21 is the king that happens just before the beast comes on the scene. So this is the last king before the beast is revealed to the world. So the one who comes before the beast will stand up, verse 20. The one that comes before the beast will stand up as a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few years, he will be destroyed or disabled, neither in anger nor in battle. In other words, the king who comes just before the beast is a world superpower leader who starts his kingship and is taken out of commission after a few years. And this person's focus is to raise taxes for the glory of the kingdom. Now, I'm not going to name any names, but I could use an example, and we could say Joe Biden, for example. Let's just consider him as our president, since we're just talking about leaders of the world, right? If Joe Biden were a world leader and he wanted to raise taxes in the glory of the kingdom, for the kingdom, right? He was a raiser of taxes for the kingdom, and his term were cut short, this could be talking about him. But he hasn't. His term has not been cut short. So obviously it's not talking about him that we know of right now, right? But if his term is cut short, then we would want to look back at this, because he is a world ruler. He does raise taxes. I mean, certainly he's raised more taxes than any president we've had in recent history. If he's cut short, I will come back to the scripture and I will go, so he kind of fits that. So who's the person that's going to be president after him? And does that person begin to fit the next verse? Because that, if we're looking at the beast, and I'm not saying Biden is the ruler before the beast, but if he were, then the person after him would be the person that we would want to keep our eyes on, right? So in his estate, in this person's estate, whoever this person is, and I mean, it could be Trudeau, it could be anybody, right? I'm just throwing out names here. In his estate will stand up a vile person. A vile person. So what does the word vile mean? A vile person. Let's go look at the Hebrew. 959 is the Hebrew number. I love this Bible, by the way.